The board is not there. Yeah. We are in the last. No, I'm fine. I have water. Yeah. This is our last session with you. I thought everybody, all the students will be here, but that's how students are. Sometimes they feel they know everything. Sometimes they sit online, It's never the same, like being in the classroom and seeing your teacher, It's very different. Thank you so much. Thank you. Last part of our journey. It's not showing. We have a lot of material to cover, but I will try to do justice to the course that we started 4 weeks ago, and I think we want to somehow recapitulate what we have said. And I think that it's time for us to think about the question of implementing what we have learned. Because learning something for the sake of learning is fine. But when you come to these kinds of lectures, and where we offer you spiritual ethics, then the objective is quite clear. That we want to lead you at one level with your spiritual connections, at the other level with human connections. When I say spiritual, it is my connection with my Creator. When I say ethics, it's my connection with you as human beings. We human beings are connected with one another at the ethical level. All human beings, regardless whether they are Muslims, non-Muslims, what you are concerned about is to show what kind of respect you afford to others. What kind of treatment you give to others. They could be your family members, could be your citizens, fellow citizens, and all of them have certain rights on you as much as you have rights on them. It's reciprocal. All human relationships are reciprocal. If I don't respect you, you won't feel like respecting me. If I don't show empathy to you, you will not feel like showing empathy to me. It means that there is something with which God has created us. And that's what I was trying to explain last week. That what there is, the universal aspect of the Quran is ethical, whereby all human beings are held accountable. The moment you say, I'm a human being, you are accountable. That's the universal dimension of the Quran. The Quran is engaged in talking to all human beings. Ya ayyuhan nas. That's the kind of address. But then once it has done that, it offers you a chance to make you Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Oh, those who believe. Otherwise, the Quran is very much interested in all human beings. It has to be, because it's a book of guidance. And the guidance is built upon the belief in the oneness of God, Tawheed. That Tawheed is so important that the moment you bring somebody else to share that Tawheed, you are destroying your spiritual connections. I'm talking about destroying your spiritual connection. Your spiritual connection need to be by one trusted, confident being. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the divine. You need to put your trust somewhere. In Urdu we say bharosa. You need to have a kind of ability to entrust your secrets to someone. And you know that they will never open it. This person will not expose me. And God is like that. Allah sattar al-uyub. He hides all our defects. He hides all our secrets. You don't even know what I do in my private life, but God knows. So you have this God consciousness is what I call was the taqwa. It's spiritual moral awareness. Spiritual, moral. Spiritual is vertical, moral is horizontal. The way I connect with you, that's the most important part. But how do we process that? What the Quran did say that very clearly is that the moment you relate yourself spiritually, you will have ease in relating morally with others. You will have inner strength to fight back selfishness, grudges, all those things that stop you from being good. In the language of akhlaq, you are building i'tibar. You are building something that when you see me, you say, I can trust this man. Not only that, this person has proved to me his or her reliability. This is i'tibar. I'tibar ijtima'i, in Farsi we say. I'tibar shakhsi. And we na'tabir, even in Arabic, has the same meaning. Ubur is to pass through something, from unknown to the known. You were unknown the first night I saw you. After seeing you after 4 times, I already know your face. I already know something about you because your eyes cannot hide what is hidden in your heart. Your eyes always show what you are. So you will find people can't look in your eyes when they speak. Then you must be careful. Because that means they're hiding something, they don't want them to see your heart. They're afraid they will be discovered or uncovered. See how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how God has created. There are signs for us. Inna fi samawat wa fi anfusikum ayat. In the heavens and the earth, and in you I have created signs. So that's the signs we want to adopt for tonight. Let's look at the possibility that we have. And I came to this slide last time. You remember my major concern has been, how do you process character? What do you do in order for you to become firm in what you believe? Sometimes you are wishy-washy. You pray, you don't pray, you say salam, you don't say salam, you greet someone, you don't greet. All these things, we call it whimsical. They change with you, You're a moody person. Sometimes you have a good mood. Now they talk about bipolarism, and I never heard it in Tanzania. I don't know if there was something like that available, Or depression. No, I never knew depression. People were always with one another. You were never alone. Being alone creates what we call the need for human company. If you don't get good human company, you might become depressed. All these things are connected with the practical application of the 4 pillars. And time to consider the 4th pillar, justice. I mentioned this last time. Justice is to administer the affairs of the people with fairness. It is to establish peace between 2 parties in conflict without taking sides. So that's one of the basic meanings. The Quran regards justice as the main force that keeps entire nature in order. God has created us in order for us to establish adala, qist, to establish justice. So God is not saying that I'm going to send you and you will have to create Hukumat Islami, Al-Hukuma Islamiyya. No. God says, I want to send you to make Hukumat Adaliyya, you know. You should have a governance that is fair, that is just. Now, you know, people fight with me when I say, they really get angry with me when I say, there is no conception of Islamic government. There's only one kind of government, just. The opposite is unjust. They can't be Islamic. If it is Islamic, then it has to be established objectively on the pillars that I have already mentioned. And one of the major pillars is justice, right? Now, exercise of authority also is dependent on justice. And here, look at the justice, adala. The Prophet, you know, was talking about adala, that you must work on adala. The people said, it's very hard for us to know who is adil, who is not adil. Said, you know, you go and ask that person, with whom is he related? With whom is he going and coming? With whom he is, you know, in other words, interacting. Ask them, is he good? If they say yes, then you have to agree that this is adil. But sometimes the people who get along with the people who are interacting with him would say, no, we didn't find him that. He has a bad reputation. All right? Among the four pillars, justice is the most critical in the development of good personhood. I'm telling you, and I am also very brotherly warning you, that if you don't believe in justice, all else doesn't matter. See how powerful it is? وَعَدِلُوا. The Quran says, وَقْسِطُوا. Constantly the Quran is saying, وَعَدِلُوا. Even if it is against your own parents, you should never agree to be unjust. So the Quran says, well, you know, even if they are your parents, for the justice you will stand firm. It doesn't matter, he's my friend. No. When justice comes, nobody is your friend, nobody is your father, nobody is your mother. In other words, can you imagine the emphasis laid on justice? And if justice is abundant, the iman goes away. With the justice is the whole idea of justice negates oppression and suppression. You will always hesitate to oppress someone, to suppress someone. You will always hesitate to say something bad about someone if you are just. You will always control your mouth. No, I will not say it, because this will hurt someone. The moment you are hurting someone, you're already moving away from justice. And you hurt people with words, you hurt people with actions, and with your doings. So all of them come together. Now let's move on. This is where we stopped last time. Tanzil is revelation. Revelation, this is where the spiritual dimension is going to be very important. In Tanzil, in revelation, we want to find out the centrality of justice. The Quran introduces the idea of justice more than 30 times, underscoring the divine concern for justice and equity. Can you tell me what is equity? What do you understand by equity? You use it in English. Quite often you say, oh, there is no equity. What do you mean by that?
Fairness?
Yes, it is fairness. For example, in distributive justice, we talk about lack of equity. You need $100, she needs $100, she needs $100. I have $300, but instead of being fair, you know, I give you 200 and maybe 50 and 50, something like that. In other words, I'm failing to be just. I'm failing to be considerate. That also is very important. Ri'aya. Ri'aya is to be considerate. Mar'iyyun, you know, the one who is considerate. The Sharia can become reality only with justice. Please remember. You might be praying day and night. You must be fasting all the time. But if you don't behave justly, everything else does not count. Everything else does not count. You might, as we say, Qa'imul Layl. Oh, there are people who pray whole night. Sa'imun Nahar, they are fasting every, day in the calendar. But if they have not justice, they have not learned justice, nothing matters. On the day of judgment, if I see my Lord on the day of judgment, I'll be asked about have you recognized somebody's right on you? Have you not given them their rights? So the parents might ask their children, didn't I bring you up? And the children might say, well, when I needed you, you were not at home. You were outside. You never took care of me. In other words, there could be what we call a conflict between children and parents. Yes, there will be. There will be, by the way. The Prophet's mission was founded upon justice. Therefore, the Quran says, Deenul Hanif. Hanif, by the way, is an upright, just person. And that's what the Quran is going to insist upon. So our spiritual ethics is in balance. Try to understand. You need to develop spiritual values for you to apply them in your human relationships. In other words, spiritual ethics is the ethics of human relationship. Is that clear to you? If human relationships are not your major concern in the society, in your life, then you have failed to understand the Quran. You are not supposed to run away like a yogi, in the mountains far away, go in the Himalayas, sitting there, become Maharishi, that's not what the Quran is teaching. The Quran says, no, you'll have to be engaged in the life. You'll have to get married. You have to have children. You have to work. And all of these things will keep you occupied. In that occupation, you'll find 2 minutes to do your salat. And God loves that. He doesn't want you to spend more than 2 or 3 minutes. The wajib salat that we do is 2 to 3 minutes. If you pray like my son does, which is express salat, then you finish in 2 minutes, In other words, we do the salat, but the salat is actually connected with the ethics. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Salat saves you from bad deeds, from shameful deeds. In other words, salat is so powerful that the moment you enter with ma'arifah into salat, with proper understanding of salat, it starts working on you, gives quality to your life. You see what I'm talking about? Quality to your life. What is the quality to my life? I'm humble. I'm not always bragging about my money. I'm not talking about my cars and how people do it. No, I'm not interested in that. Yes, I do have those things. I'm not shunning them. It's not shunning the material wealth, but it is able to control it and keep it under control. How do we do that? So that's justice, yes.
So you said being considerate as part of equity. What if, in order to stand for justice, you have to be stern?
What is the?
You said being considerate is part of
yes,
equity.
Yes, that's right.
But sometimes in standing for justice, you have to be stern and...
Yeah. Consideration should not be sacrificed. Justice cannot be sacrificed for the consideration. Oh, she is my sister. That's a consideration.
Right.
And you're not going to do that. When justice demands, then no, even my sister should be told. So it's very strict and stern. You remember the story of Abdullah ibn Umar. Umar ibn al-Khattab's son was found drinking. And his father punished him. There was no consideration. That is my son. And people also knew that, okay, all right, it's Abdullah, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He has to be perfect. No. His father said, no, I will punish you for what you have done. In other words, he did not hesitate to do it. There was no consideration. When it comes to justice, to come to the recognition of the rights of the others, then you have to be strict about it. Oh, he happens to be my son. But what if my son is misbehaving? He's not paying back his, debts to anyone. He's borrowing money from everyone and he doesn't pay back. You have to be hard on him, even if he's your son. There's no consideration. There's no mercy when you miss the opportunity of doing justice. Yes.
Professor, I wonder if you could elaborate on that. Sometimes the response to lack of justice might be forgiveness, because you emphasized that in your earlier lecture.
Yes.
It depends on the severity of what is being done that's incorrect.
Okay.
So, for example, the Palestinian homes are being occupied. I don't think anybody would say forgive the people who are occupied.
That's right, yeah.
So we have to take action. But there are moments when, or I guess, what is Islam's response, or in your study, when is forgiveness a helpful tool, and when is it helpful to actually stand for things? And you can fight for justice without being unkind.
Right.
So my boss, for example, the VP, on the conference calls, he would constantly cut me off by saying my name 3 times, like twice.
Yeah.
Treating me like a child. And I got on a call with him for an hour, and I said, when you do that, you make me feel like a child, and I'm not one. So I appreciate if you don't do that.
Yes.
He's a very charismatic and very threatening guy. But I used kindness to convey a message and to studying for justice. So I wonder
What is the line?
Yeah, right.
Where should one draw a line? See, let's recognize something. There are certain things we do to ourselves. Something wrong that we do. Zalamtu nafsi. The Quran says, it's teaching us, Ya Rabbi zalamtu nafsi. La taghfir li wa tarhamani la akunanna min al-khasirin. Please forgive me, Ya Allah. I have done wrong. I have wronged myself. Now, the question arises, can you wrong yourself? Aristotle would say, no. In order for you to wrong, you need someone else. You should be somebody outside. What the Quran is saying that, no, there is zalamtu nafsi. There is, I do wrong myself. How do I wrong myself? When I become considerate in those areas where I should not be. Or where I should be, considerate, I'm not being. In other words, there are times when I should forgive. There are times when I should be stern. Let's say, it's your son, your brother, your daughter, and you're dealing with them in all kindness, and yet there is a sense in which they're still learning. I better be considerate. I better, show mercy and forgiveness. But there comes a time when you say any further forgiveness will not produce the result. So you become the assessor. You find out when it works. Sometimes forgiveness works. At other times, stance, is more powerful. You might achieve better results. But what is important is that you try these strategies in your life at different times. I wouldn't say there is only one way of doing it. Each person is different. We have different temperaments. We have different expectations of others. And therefore, sometimes it takes a toll on us. If we don't understand, how should we do it? Yes?
This gentleman has raised a very important issue in this society where he is thinking that he's an adult and somebody has to respect that, and his boss. Whereas I could see that the boss could have a very nurturing attitude towards him. He may not be doing injustice to him. So I don't know where
You can talk later, but
it is
an opinion commonly shared.
I'm reminded of my child.
Not kind.
I'm reminded of my child when you tell something or something, oh, you're mean, you're unjust. Kids raise.
Yeah. You can't do that.
So that's where, I think there are certain other pressures. So my question to you is, okay, this fairness and justice system, and I fully agree, whatever you're saying and according to Islam, but how can you infiltrate or sort of you can teach your kids, but what about the society outside? Like you have to say mean to your parent, and you would be surprised. Can parents be mean?
Yes, they can be.
Okay, so most parents I know were not mean or are not mean.
Yeah.
So, how would you promote the concept of justice in certain areas like this gentleman has said? I don't see any problem here except for the misunderstanding between the two, and not to get upset with all that, but it's just to tell somebody in a nice way later on that maybe, I think.
You see, there is a lot of paternalistic attitude among the adults or among those who are somehow controlling your livelihood or something. There's paternalistic attitude. My own experience, for example, in the medical field is that sometimes the doctors become paternalistic. They don't let you exercise your own autonomy, your own decision making. But what is important to keep in mind is that doing wrong is possible by all human beings. Yes. There might be your mother, she might be your mother, your father. I've seen with my own eyes a family breaking apart because the daughter-in-law doesn't like the mother-in-law. The son is attached to his mother. And how do you manage that, balance between mother and wife? There are two women demanding attention from you. Should you abandon one for the sake of the other? What exactly is the solution? And I do a lot of counseling. That's why I'm bringing that example, that in many of the cases, there is an imbalance in the son's attitude towards mother. Mother is a mother, but she can also be unreasonable. She can also demand things that are not fair, to the daughter-in-law. How do you then negotiate the space between the mother and the wife? Sometimes it's a son-in-law who misbehaves, who, has a different attitude towards mother-in-law. All of these things are very normal in the human life. What we need to understand is that each case provides you. What we are trying to do is that you can solve any case. The strategy is entirely in your hands. Therefore we say, Rabbi habli hukman walhiqni bis-salihin. Ya Allah, give me the ability to judge correctly. It's very difficult sometimes to judge when there are people involved whom you love, whom you respect, So father on one side, mother on one side. Sometimes children get involved in the parental fights. Who do they side with? Most of the time I've seen in my counseling, the children take the side of the mother. But the mother also sometimes is unfairly putting down the father. So there are so many issues, and each issue I have certain rules that I follow. But I don't apply them across all the cases, because each case is individual, it's a unique case. Therefore we see, by the way, one of the things that you should keep in mind is ethics is always public. Right. Unlike Iman, unlike spirituality, you have to discover spirituality. There are some phases that can show the spiritual well-being of the person. You see the face and say, my God, that's charismatic. That means also there is a spiritual level to it. It's not the way you wear your beard or you wear your hijab that makes you that. What makes you that is your inner health. Because we have said that being ethical is to find peace within yourself. The search is to get the peace. That's objective. If you are in your handling of the situation, if you become peaceful, that means you have handled it well. But if you are further troubled and further in pain, then you must know, let me go back and see what things I did not do right. Maybe I did this right, maybe that was not right. In other words, the Prophet's mission was founded upon justice. Even in speaking, sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say, "Khairul kalami ma qalla wa dalla." The best speech is the one that is short and to the point. So some people, they talk and talk and talk, or they repeat things, but it's not something that has been, praised by the Prophet. The Prophet said, don't use too many words if you can be sufficiently communicative in few words. Sometimes you need to, sometimes you don't need to. Many times you don't need to. You are dealing with intelligent people. You say, okay, I've told once, it should work. I might give the reminder. All of these things are part of the strategies. Yes.
I feel in my personal experience, people's response to lack of justice is either violence when it becomes too much, or one of letting things go so that they're actually abused by the elders of the world. And I feel like somewhere in the middle, and this is a really difficult thing to do, is to confront the oppressor with kindness. And this is the example that I gave.
Yes.
And I think the sister's point is that sometimes evaluating justice is very subjective. And in the case that I mentioned, it was objective because it happened to 5-6 other people and it happened on different patterns. So when I did that, my colleagues thanked me for standing up to the bully. So I respond to the sister. But even in my own personal life with my mother, she means well, she loves me. So I could either, I told her, I said, I have one of two choices. I could either resent you for not understanding me, or I could really abandon you, right? So I'm deciding somewhere in the middle, and that is to have a conversation that is full of kindness, and it actually reflects what I feel and think, and I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
And to have that conversation, a lot of people actually are very, very afraid of it, because it requires courage.
That's right, it does. It does. You remember one of the pillars was shuja'a, brave. That's the braveness that we are talking about. That's the type of language. I think you need to be firm, and being firm means you are shuja'a. You are brave enough to stand firm in what you are saying, what you are doing. I think that I want to underscore an important realistic aspect of the Quran. Quran is morally realistic. Quran doesn't say that you are born with perfection, but you are perfectible. You have the potential to become perfected, provided you do it. In laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a. Human beings must struggle all the time. And I think it's a struggle that you and I know it quite well. There's complexity about human life, and therefore the Quran believes in moral realism. It doesn't want to push you, saying that this is the solution, you can't apply any other solution. No, the given situation demands from you careful analysis, and you use it accordingly. But remember one thing that you will be asked about: were you unfair? As long as you are, I warned my mother, I warned my wife, I will not take it anymore. Your fights, please keep them to yourselves if you want to do it. But I cannot be involved. And I do that, by the way, with my counseling, that's how you need to. But I can't talk like that to my mother. I said, no, your mother has to realize what difficulty you are having. You are a married man. You are no more the young boy that she brought up. Therefore, you need to work out a solution. And if sometimes you have to tell your wife that you better stop misbehaving like that, You can't treat my mother like that. In other words, there is all the time the act of mizan, scaling out. How do I handle this situation? I have not found myself to be successful, by the way. On many occasions I have failed, yes.
Do you find some difficulty in counseling when you realize that you cannot talk about justice to the two groups of people? One may be understanding the message of the Quran very well, all the principles, and the other one doesn't know what is in the Quran and what is ethical, spiritual ethics. So I think in my life I have seen that there's always a problem in having that type of a justice and relationship
Yeah.
where there is lack of understanding of the Quran. So these are I think these are the very challenging questions
Yes, yes.
for the parents, how to be at par with that
That's
type
right.
of an understanding.
That's right.
With the kids, because that's creating all that conflict.
Exactly. I fully agree with you. I think that I've seen in my counseling with the parents and the children conflict, the youths. And the parents who come from a different background, when they come to United States, they follow that culture from which they came. And they fail to see that the children have changed. They've been brought up in a different education, different cultural settings, and all these things, and therefore they need to be treated differently. And they keep on treating the children in a dictatorial way. They become dictators. They want to control everything. We have done it. I have done it, by the way. When they were growing up, I said, they have to become this and that. I still remember an argument between me and my wife. My wife says, they must pray, stick with them rather than me forcing them to pray. Because if I'm not there, they will not pray. In other words, most of the strategies are those in which we dictate. And my wife is a tough cookie. She doesn't take this nonsense. She calls me, very softy. I'm soft. But what I believe in is that there is a reasonable way to talk to your children. If you talk with power all the time, you might lose them. So I think I have been proven to be right. We are married for 54 years. I've been, and the big boys, big men whom we brought up, alhamdulillah, they're good human beings, They're not ideal. They're not like me. They're not like my wife. But that doesn't matter. They are themselves. And I like them the way they are. They don't pretend anything, to do. They come, my lawyer son, for example, misses his prayer. So when I call him, said, have you prayed? Dad, don't make me feel guilty. So, in other words, there is this. Yeah, but I say, I'm not asking you to pray. I'm just asking you, did you pray? I'm not saying go and pray. That's a different. If I'm commanding you, then you have a right to object. That, well, I will not listen to you. In other words, I believe that human beings, if given a chance, given freedom, enough freedom, with care and with intelligence, would behave quite well. And it's a universal value, justice. It's not only Islamic value. People talk about justice all the time. Oh, that's unfair. Haven't you heard it? Most ordinary people will say, that's unfair. The way you're treating me is not fair. Now, what is fair? That means I'm not justly treated. My rights have not been recognized by you. And my rights, since they have not been recognized by you, I have no responsibility towards you. That's what, the children are telling the parents sometimes. You never took care of my school or anything. Why should I be taking care of you? I hear this. It's a terrible thing. I've gone sometimes, I've flown to New York, I've flown to Geneva on these issues, by the way. And they were invited me to come, and there are some very big families that do that. In other words, the Quran has applied moral realism to human problems. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Human beings have been created weak. Weak in what? Weak in very easily getting upset, very easily getting overjoyed. The Quran describes them. They become fretful when they have received the ni'mah, or, they reject the ni'mah. So, in other words, we are a complex being. We are not simply 2 + 2, 4. We are far more than that. And there are so many fractions needed in order for us to come to the 4 that we are looking for. So, keep that in mind. Now, this is my last lecture, because I think that we have reached a point whereby in the Muslim community, we talk about Sharia as if Sharia has nothing to do with ethics. We talk about halal and haram. I mentioned to you that, here I am married to my wife for 54 years now. All of a sudden I become romantic. I want to marry another woman of 20 years old, 25 years old. I go to the mullah, I go to the alim and says, okay, I'll perform your marriage. That's perfectly shari. But he's not asking an ethical question, how long have you been married? If he had asked me, and if he had found out that I'm married for 54 years, he would have considered me immoral to do that. You are being immoral. You are married to one wife for 54 years, and now she is old, she has been part of your life all these years, and now you want to get married, and you can marry it, and legally it is fine. Sharia says it's okay. You can marry 4. This is where we need to be very careful. This is what I have discussed in my new book. I have discussed juridical ethics. That even in Islam, all the things that you do, all the wajibat, all the fardhiyat, whatever you do, all of them have to be informed by justice. Like the example I gave. That here I am, I believe I'm very religious. I follow the Sharia. I did the nikah, I did the aqd. You are wrong in what you did. Nobody is telling me that I'm wrong. They're actually telling my wife, what did you do? Why did he go to another woman? Instead of blaming me, they blame her. That's how culture is made up. But here we are looking, what is Sharia without justice? Sharia without justice is what I have described just now. Can the Sharia represent divine interest without adhering to justice? In other words, in everything that the Sharia requires, always ask this question. Always ask this question. Is this fair? I'm being asked to pray 5 times a day.
How are you separating Sharia from justice?
We do. Just now I told you. Justice means moral values.
But your example, I think that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen according to...
Yes.
Yeah, Sharia 4, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It happens.
You see, you help a poor man, miskin, faqir. You help them by giving them some money. But you're not being fair to them. Because 5 cents or $5 or $50 will not solve his problem. How better it would not be, for example, for you to create a job for this person, to teach him something. Are you willing to learn? Can I pay for your expenses? In other words, that kind of justice. So, give them the zakat, is not enough. We need to look at zakat as a means for making a person independent. In our countries, if you go everywhere in the third, even here I find, they're asking you, we have a dime, I don't know, something. But very few. But in our part of the world, in the Muslim world, in the third world countries, there's so much poverty. And there are so many rich people who spend so much money for the marriages, for, I don't know, their parties. And these days there's so much money coming. People have a lot of money today than they had 50 years ago. Because there's a lot of money floating, and there are so many things that allow you to earn a lot of money. And here you are, confronted with their situation. Oh, Sharia says we should help the poor people. Does it mean I should give $10, and I'm relieved of my responsibility? The Sharia will say, no, I'm teaching you to be fair. I want you to be just. Do more. Look at your capacity. Look at the zakat rules. Zakat is saying that you calculate the minimum. What zakatable income is after deduction of all that you have used. And then there is this, money that left and you give from that. Now, what we have done is that we have done 2.5%. Oh, very easy solution. But what the Prophet has taught was nisab. If minimum is left in this kind of things, then this is what you give zakat. It's not 2.5%. If I'm a millionaire, I have several real estates, they all are zakatable because I have lots of them. That's not 2.5%. It's more. I have to be conscientiously correct about it. But we have reduced it. So poverty will never leave Muslim societies. If we were giving our zakat on time and we were giving more zakat, there will be no poor among us. My teachers used to say that we are not giving enough to the poor people. We have a lot of money. God has given a lot of money. And instead of spending the right way, we are not doing it. This is what we mean. What the Sharia without, then how does can a jurist determine a ruling without engaging different aspects of justice? Let me give you one example. I'm a chaplain in the University of Virginia hospital system. So I go every week and I take care of the sick people in 2 different sections. In the surgery ICU and in the children's section, pediatric section. And I go and see them, especially end-of-life decisions. So one day, the hospital calls me, we need you. There's a Muslim patient, we need you. So I go. And I see an Iraqi man who has suffered stroke. This was the 3rd time. The doctors were saying there is no hope. You can't save this person. And the more we interfere, the more worse his situation will be. We should stop all the ventilation, everything that we are doing, life-saving equipment, so that he can die in peace. So the wife comes. They have 6 children. 2 are grown-up boys, and they are insisting on the hospital to keep him alive. The wife is saying, I'm the one who is going to take care of him. I can't do it. I'm working in a laundry to pay for my children. There's no other income coming to us. I'm paying for them. If I sit home and take care of him, these boys are not going to take care of them. It's true. They were grown up and they had their girlfriends, they were out. And here was the mother, the wife. But you won't believe that we called Najaf in Iraq, and the mother-in-law started abusing the daughter-in-law. You have killed my son. You can't do this. I took the phone. I said, please don't talk like that. This is not her fault. Yes, it happened. This is the 3rd time this man is having. The doctors, I said, the experts are saying that this cannot be saved. But the boys and the mother had a conflict. And they said, you don't care for our father. I said, well, are you home to take care of him? Go, do it. Then I will know. I don't mind him going back. And they was in Harrisonburg, in Virginia. Fortunately, the next day, the man died. I say fortunately. Unfortunately for the others, but fortunately for the wife, for the woman who was going to become enslaved by the situation that he was having. And she was the only one who was earning. The boys were not giving the money at home. They had their own lives. In other words, can you imagine the dilemma? This is what we call moral dilemma. Isn't it the question of justice here? It is. How do you treat your mother? You treat her like that? Instead of understanding her situation, you actually make it difficult for her to do it? And I've seen those cases, not the first time, by the way. Several times I've seen it. And what is bothersome is that people talk about halal and haram, but they never talk about moral, immoral. Haram, hada. They keep on reminding you, this is haram, this is. But well. Haram, halal has to have ethical backing. If thing is haram, then surely it is immoral. If thing is halal, then surely it is moral. In other words, there are measurements given. How sometimes the mujtahid or faqih don't understand. And I will talk about one of them who says, once you start the machines for the terminally ill patients, you can't turn them off. Can't turn them off. Even the doctors say there is no hope if the person is in vegetative state and you are intervening in the natural course. How can you say that? No, it is haram to do it. So we tell them that, look, contextualize this whole thing. And you'll discover that there's economic pressure on the family. There is, financial burden, all kinds of issues. They might, these husbands or the wives' retirement funds will be completely depleted. There will be no way for supporting this family. Who has made this ruling? One of them. Without engaging different aspects of justice. Are we doing justice when we say these things? Are we considering the pros and cons of helping? How are we doing it? How does a ruling achieve cognitive validity? I'tibar. Trustable. Whenever you get an opinion, don't accept it blindly. God has given us the measurement. It's an ethical, moral scale. You find out, is this really workable? Is this something that I need to do? Is it fair that I would do that? Although I'm being given the fatwa, so to speak. Darul Ifta gives you the fatwa and you follow the fatwa and you are doing so many wrongs. Because they have given the fatwa in the ivory tower of the Muslim world. Like we are in the ivory tower of, the universities where we give our opinions in a very lofty way. They're also doing the same thing. Do they have realization what people will be affected by it? Can you see what we are talking about? Are the principles of decision making separated from the considerations of justice? Yes, the principle says life is sacred, the person must be kept alive. Life is sacred. You can't let a person die. At the same time, the question of justice raises so many other issues. How do we make those decisions? So imagine, zalamtu nafsi. This is something that we all do. We do wrong to ourselves. And the Prophet ﷺ was very, very particular. He said, look, if you tell lies, you're doing zalamatun nafs. If you do this nifaq, you are hurting yourself. You have to be careful about it. Don't do it. In other words, he set very objective principles for us to follow. Very simple to follow. The Prophet ﷺ was a great psychologist. When you read what he taught, you just love the Prophet. And even if you are an outsider, you still might say, oh my God, this is so beautiful what he taught. And what he did was that he put in us ethical sensibility. He looked at our public life. He said, if you don't know how to behave in this world, you are not fit to be a Muslim. A Muslim is the one from whose tongue and behavior other people are in safety. They are safe from that kind of abuse from him or from her. So here is juridical ethics. What I have done in my book is that I have brought Sharia and ethics together. And the reason I am doing is that until now, ethics is not part of the Sharia. So if you go in Cairo, you study in Cairo, Mecca, Medina, wherever you go, they teach you jurisprudence, they teach you fiqh, but they don't teach you akhlaq. Akhlaq is the foundation of fiqh. Usul al-fiqh cannot be without akhlaq. How can I make it? If you come to me like an ordinary person, you come and ask me, what am I supposed to do here? And when I'm considering your problem, I'm weighing the pros and cons of akhlaq, ethics, because I don't know much. Well, you are telling me this is what's happening in your house, or this is what's happening to your son, this is what happens to you in the school, all of these things. I was in Toronto and this girl came to me that I am being accused of plagiarism. And it means that they will kick me out of the university. But I haven't done it. I said, how do we know you haven't done it? You must have done it. They can't just accuse you. There must be no, they have not provided the proof. The professor doesn't like me. I said, that can't be so. We have to find out. I had to go to the York University and talk to the people carefully, seeing what paper was and how it was. I didn't find it was plagiarism. The problem was online information can be quoted now in the papers for which the documentation is very weak. You pick up online sentences, and nobody knows that you are reading online stuff. You think you don't know, people don't know. Sometimes the professors know it, they know that this, I have seen it somewhere. I have seen one of the sites, websites, and they catch the student. And it becomes a big issue. How do you handle that? What do? You take side with the Muslim girl? You take side with the professor? Where is the truth?
What did you do?
I was able to tell the professor that be compassionate. This is human weakness. To cheat is not something natural. It comes at a time when you are desperately doing it. She was desperate to pass her exam, and she was afraid that she would lose everything. So be considerate about it. Maybe give her a second exam. Tell her, do it again.
The benefit of doubt.
Benefit of doubt, the evidence was strong enough. But I purposely said, it's not really strong, it's probability. Why don't you act on probability and let her take the exam again, change the exam. If she doesn't do well second time, fail her. So you have to find ways. The challenges await us. Decisiveness in one's intention. Intention, niyyah, is the backbone of ethics. Why did I do it? Because I thought it will benefit people. Instead, it has hurt them. Now I have to find ways of compensating them because I hurt them by doing so. You see how many situations are like that in life, that you come out with a clear intention of helping, you end up causing a greatest disaster. It happens. How do you correct it? This is decisiveness in one's intention. The intention that is fortified by the ability to execute it unwaveringly, supporting the truth, and committedly willing to face the difficulty on one's path to building a good character. Following the truth, that's not easy. Following the truth, especially if the truth is against you, you don't want it. And you see, the Prophet was known as As-Sadiq. Al-Amin was Sadiq. Two qualities of a prophet. Trustworthy, Al-Amin, Sadiq, truthful. Two things the Quraysh knew very well. And they had accepted that Muhammad is Amin, Al-Amin, he is also a Sadiq. And whatever he said weighed heavy on their conscience because they knew he was truthful. Why are we not accepting him? Why are we opposing him? In other words, what the Prophet did was that he gave the responsibility to them. You do whatever you want. I'm not going to force you to believe in me. But I leave it to you. If you have found me worthy of your belief, then believe me. Otherwise, just go away. Don't hurt me, I will not hurt you. In good character, one's path to good character is not easy. It's a very rough path. And there is a temptation to live the commitment to the truth and justice. Al-Aziz, a person able to withstand all difficulties on her path to achieve the ultimate good. And this is what I think we need.
Interesting. You didn't write Al-Aziza, and then you said on her path.
Yeah, we are supposed to use inclusive language.
That was good.
My student long ago, she wrote to me, Professor, you're using sexist language. Please don't do it. So from that time on, I wrote the first book, I didn't care. But the second, third, fourth, fifth, all of them are based on this inclusive language, which means, that you recognize all human beings as human beings, men and women both. Honoring an approach that preserves human dignity. Let me come to this, by the way. Karamat al-insaniya. You have to respect the dignity of another person. The moment you are hurting dignity of another person, God is cutting off your relationship with him. No, he said, no, you're not going to do that. So men, women, children, poor, rich, everybody has a dignity. By dignity, what do we mean by dignity? It's very important to keep in mind. By dignity, we mean God-given respect. Sharafat, karamat, this is what we say. Izzat-e-nafs. We use all these in order to describe this. Honoring an approach that preserved human dignity and human ability to hold one's ground based on truth and justice. Truth and justice. It's very, very difficult. It's easy to say. It's not easy to do, Decisiveness should not lead, keep this in mind, should not lead to arrogance or animosity or doing wrong to others. Yeah, I'm decisive. I want all of you to change the way I'm changed. And I become oppressive. Sometimes we do with our children, by the way. With our friends we do it. We try to change them. We're trying to mold them according to what we are. And that's not going to increase your spirituality. It makes it even more difficult for you to be accepted. So we are looking at some of the challenges that await us. So now, to sum it up, if I were to say Islamic ethics is deontological, what does it mean? I'm explaining 3 positions in the Quranic ethics. And I deal with all of them in my book, by the way. I speak about deontological and voluntary ethics. It begins with the question, and I think it's a valid question for all of us in this gathering. How do I know what I know to be good or bad? Well, how do we know? How do I know? And my thesis is that God has implanted in us moral law. God has implanted in us moral law. We know right from the wrong. We can never make an excuse. I didn't know. We'll be taken to task for that. Values have objective existence. You and I, all of us, we know cruelty is bad. Generosity is good. Objectively we know it. Because you can feel what generosity does and you can feel what cruelty does. They can be known by independent human reason. This is where there's a big fight among the Muslims, among Muslim scholars. Some of them will say, no, we don't, our nature is incapable of knowing it. And some will say, no, God's command is enough for us to know it. In other words, there are 2 views about deontological ethics.
A society or a region which may have been corrupted and there are rulers who are corrupt and the whole society is corrupt. Do you think that this judgment and the values do exist? Do they have their objective existence?
Oh yeah, it's applied.
In those societies?
Yes, even those societies. The problem was scholars.
Problem is?
Scholars.
Scholars.
In the age when there were no newspapers, there were no media, there were people who were trusted to give the information. So I remember going to the villages and people in the mosque would gather and there was one person who could read announcements and he would stand there and read these announcements aloud. In other words, this man now became an intermediary between knowledge and people. In other words, we have, I don't mean to say all of these scholars are corrupt or anything, but I do know that they did not impart the knowledge the way it should have been imparted. So we have a chance. We have a chance. They can be known by independent human reason. That's why they oppose it. Values can be known from scriptural tradition, Quran, Sunnah, that seeks correlation with reason. Correlation with reason. So if the Quran says you must take care of your old parents, because they were your parents. But there also we find that the reason also says the same thing. Aren't you supposed to take care of those who have benefited you before? You were small, you couldn't do anything, now they are doing for you. Now it's their time to be taken care of. In other words, there is reciprocity, as I mentioned. Sometimes values can be known by both. This was the position of Mu'tazilites and also the Shiites. Rational theology, naturalist theology. They believe that human values are objective. Everybody who hears for the first time respect, they know what is respect, what respect is all about. Everybody who's talking about empathy, they know what is empathy. In other words, we know by our naturally given power to realize the good of this world and the akhirah. Is that clear to you? So our ethics, by the way, in the Quran is both deontological, and now I come to the second form. The second also is not a way, is based entirely on the Quran, by the way. The first one says reason is okay. Reason can reach the same understanding that the revelation is trying to give, the Quran is trying to give. Reason will not disagree with what Quran is teaching. But the second position was that God tells you what is right and what is wrong. Hence, they cannot be known independent of revelation. In other words, if the Quran didn't say that, if the Sunnah did not say that, then it is not ethically wrong or morally wrong. You can do it. It creates what we call very, I think, tricky situation. So if you don't read in the Quran, if you don't read in the Sunnah, you will not follow it. Is it possible to do that? No. There are so many issues that are not in the Quran. There are so many areas of medicine today or commerce life today. It's not in the Quran. There were no big banks like we have today. It was a different, you remember, I don't know if you know the history, 8th, 9th century in Baghdad, Damascus, our bankers were Jews. Muslims would not do the banking because they said this is haram, we will not touch it. Now, was it the right understanding? No. Today we have Islamic banks, they are not very different from non-Islamic, but, at least people like me or like, Iskandar, we might think that, well, this is the bank where we can put the money without any problem. But you know quite well that they pay you interest in the form of musharaka and mudaraba, and nothing matters. Ultimately, they are no different than other banks. This is what I mean. Thus, their source is ultimately only the Quran and the Sunnah, although reason can be used in subordinate ways to understand and interpret the revelation. We started with the very important statement in this class that the Quran is the center of moral admonition. But does the Quran speak to all the situation, or does the Quran provide principles of all the situation? Principles of all situations. So once you understand the principle of the Quran, then you can apply in different contexts. Our job is to find out what is the Quran teaching us. If the Quran teaches us that this is, the way you should be doing, the cases in the Quran are talking about specific instance, but behind that instance is a value. Behind that instance there is, a general principle that we need to find out. So we don't read the Quran superficially. We read the Quran as a source of the principles. This was the position of the Ash'arists, traditional theologians. Mu'tazilite and Ash'arites are all Sunnis, by the way. Majority of the Sunni Muslims are Ash'arites, Ash'ari. That means they believe that the only way you can learn about ethics and morality, that's why there is a resistance of teaching ethics independently. It is only from the Quran and the Sunnah. But they are not talking about ethics, they are talking about ahkam al-shar'iyyah. They are talking about ahkam. How should we know about the hukm? This is what it is. The traditionalist theologian. The third position, this is where all our philosophers, I don't know, Razi, Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, so many philosophers. Western scholars, when they studied the philosophy, they said they were all secular. I don't know. They use the word secular for them, but I have no idea whether they were secular or religious, but certainly they came in the culture, they were in the culture which was thoroughly religious culture. So, values are objective, like the first position, deontological. And they can be entirely known by the independent reason of wise people, including philosophers. In other words, not everybody is capable of thinking the right way. There are some in the community who have the wisdom to guide you, all right? The role of revelation becomes circumscribed by emphasis on pure reason. This is very Kantian, by the way. If you want to look at the ethics in the West, it's very much similar to that. However, they are presented by a prophet. They also, Ibn Sina says, the prophet is a miracle. The Quran is a miracle. So that's what they think. And their language is more for the ordinary language. The common people in the persuasive language of scriptural tradition. The Quran and the Sunnah are then the language that is presented to average people, average person. It's not only for the specialists. So sometimes you hear in the Muslim community, oh no, you don't know the Quran. The Quran can be interpreted only by the specialists. No, we all have been given the Quran. We all should be reading and interpreting and understanding it for ourselves. This was the position of Muslim philosophers, also regarded as secularist ethics.
Professor, I find the third position, if you can elaborate on it. So philosophers basically say that pure reason can stand on its own, and the revelation's role is to make that value simple enough for the common people.
Right.
Is that the thesis?
I think, let me once again explain that philosophers were elitists. They wanted to argue that the function of using reason and demonstrate its validity and truth is the function of few. It's the philosophers who can do it. The prophets come and say, no, I'm going to change average people, average person on the earth. And they use the language that is more perceptible by the people, average people. For example, the language of Jannah and Nar, the paradise and the hell. It's more understandable by the ordinary people that yes, Jannah is restful, it's a garden, that's where, people will live who have done good. And Nar, the fire, is the place where, if you don't behave well, you will be put. Now, that's the language that is comprehensible by the average people, by the ordinary people. In other words, what they wanted to say was, the language of philosophy is superior to the language of revelation. Yes, there's a good book by, Fazlur Rahman, when he says, the prophecy among philosophers. how did they see the prophets? And therefore Ghazali was very angry with them. He criticized them all. Said, no, that's not true. Revelation has equal power and equal ability to reach out even the most intelligent. No, I mean, but that's the battle in the scholarship. But here we are concerned. What I want to show you for the last time is, how do we make a decision in the Sharia? I want to show you the distinction. This is derivation of juridical decision, hukm or fatwa. How do you make a decision based on the sources that God has provided you, that reason has provided you, that ijma, the consensus of the community has provided you to make a decision? So I'm coming here first. New case. New case is that, I'm talking about traditional societies where women were not working. Now they are working. So here there's a question about it. Can a woman work in the office where there are strangers, ajnabi, you know? What happens to them? So new case is a far'a. It's to be decided by a jurist, by the ulama, by the specialist. Particular minor premise specifying present instance. Can women work in the office? Or can women become the president of a country? Or can women hold public office? All of these things are part of the far'iyat. They are the new issues that have come up now. They were not discussed during the Prophet's time. All right? So that's what we say. This arrow showing down and coming down, this goes up and this comes down. We start our research in the Quran. We study the Quran, we study the history, we study the Sunnah, and our search is to find a paradigm case, an asl. Is there anything that we can find in the sources that would tell us how to do these things, how to make a decision? In other words, we move from the known to the unknown. This is known as al-qiyas. Al-qiyas, analogical deduction, analogical reasoning. I know one thing and I want to find out if I can do that to explain the unknown. So there are things, for example, known in Egypt, but they're not known here. And therefore I want to make a decision about things that are here and they're not known to the Egyptian scholars. Can I decide on that? This is what helps me. In other words, I go through the research. This is research that I do. I'm talking about Sharia, all right?
Can you follow the case of the women working in the office?
Okay, so I'll come now.
Arrows, if you could just connect us to the asl.
So I'm looking at the Quran, I'm looking at the Sunnah to find out, did women work and earn during the Prophet's time? Yes, Khadija did, you know, so. Oh yeah, you know, you have exemplars there. Oh, you know, did they hold any political office? Then you talk about Sayyida Aisha. She was quite active in a political, sense. So you go and find these cases for the public participation of a woman. In the Quran and the Sunnah, in the history. By Sunnah I mean akhbar, history. Because they preserve the paradigm cases for us. So we do the research. Then we come to the decision. I was asked this question about women in the public space. I looked in the Quran, I looked in the Sunnah, and finally I came to a decision. I provided the hukm, the juridical decision. Also known as fatwa, right? So necessary conclusion about the present case. The way I decide on it, I'm a scholar, I'm doing this, I compare it with all the texts that I could read and find out, and finally I draw my conclusion that it's perfectly all right for a woman to earn.
If there was you also mentioned that there might be situations which are not present in Sunnah and in the Quran. So how would you derive those principles in order for you to come down to the hukam?
Let me give you another example. Abortion.
Yes.
Abortion is a good case. Now, abortion is not discussed in the Sharia as a separate issue. It is discussed only in the penal code, because the aborted child or fetus is liable to be paid compensation. So let's say the doctor did it. Then the doctor must pay compensation to the wife, to the woman. Or the woman herself did it. She wanted to get rid of the child or whatever it was. Then she is responsible, she has to give her husband that money. Or the husband does it, forcing the wife to do it. Then he should be giving to the wife. Now, here comes the tricky part. We have to decide where should we look for the abortion, because that title is not to be found in the Sunnah. Sachedina? No. There's no chapter like that. Or in the Quran, there is no. Yes, there in the Quran, there is La tuhriku anfusakum. Don't destroy yourselves. But it's you have to stretch it very widely in order to include the abortion there. So I'm going up and down through the sources to make a decision. What I discover is that there is a right of the mother and the right of the child that are in conflict with one another. The mother has a right to safety. Her life is all of a sudden declared to be in danger. If it is declared to be in danger, and the child has to be aborted, then this is perfectly all right, because she is murajjah, she is preponderant in being saved. This will be here. And this can change with the increase of our knowledge. So Sharia then, it might rule, I've seen in the Sharia, for example, non-Muslim bodies the cadavers can be used to teach anatomy or physiology in the medical schools. But why only non-Muslim? So they used to import Hindu bodies from India, in the Middle East, to teach physiology, anatomy. Because you need a body. The student, if he doesn't know, he cannot do these things. So here you find those instances. Later on I found that many ulama said all dead must be respected. Whether Muslim or a non-Muslim, it makes no difference. They all have dignity. Therefore, you can't touch them. What if I make the wasiyah that my body, I'm giving it to the medical school? Is my wasiyah valid? The answer comes, it doesn't belong to you. How can you make wasiyah about something that doesn't belong to you? You can make wasiyah only about things that belong to you. You are not an owner of your body. God is the owner of the body. So there are lots of debates, but I want you to understand that decisions are not made carelessly. They are made with great care and study, and there are councils and councils until the decision is made. Finally, this is another one. Now I'm talking about ethics. How is it different, the ethical decision, how is it different than the Shari'i decision? I must say quite clearly from the very beginning that I gave you many cases about and providing particular facts. I use an analogy when I teach this. When you go to the doctor with a sore throat, and you ask the doctor, would you write to me, would you prescribe for me antibiotic? And the doctor says, no, I must send your mucus first in the lab for culture and find out if you have tuberculosis, something that I need to treat. Otherwise, go home, gargle, have aspirin or something, painkiller, and control it until the lab result comes. This is how here goes. I'm looking for all the information that I could seek, for example, for abortion. I don't have enough information because it's not discussed in the Muslim literature in the way I want to find it. I find in Judaism, in Christianity, in secular ethics, they discuss it. But in Islamic ethics, this is something new. This has not been discussed in the past, and now they are discussing it. So I do the research to find a precedent and draw my conclusion. And my conclusions are provisional, like the example I gave. When you go to see the doctor and you have a sore throat, he doesn't give you immediately antibiotic. He says, I will do the culture and then will prescribe you. This is what exactly happens in the ethical decision. I'll do my research and find out what is going to be the result of this query that you are making. A possibility of revision through further research and information on the case. So the major difference is, we are never told that hukm can change. In the fiqh, we are never told that. Although they do it all the time, but ulama don't want to give the impression that the Sharia can change anytime you want. They want to say that this is sacred law, but what is missed here is that there are human elements that must be studied at the human level, sociologically, anthropologically, psychologically.
So all this is the same process which goes into
Yes,
ijtihad?
that's right. The same kind of ijtihad, but I'll tell you something. In ethics, we simply recommend. We don't give a fatwa. Fatwa is not recognized in the ethics. In ethics, I can say, it's up to you. You do it or don't do it. But in fatwa, I say, it's wajib for you to do it. What I'm telling you is a proper fatwa. So you don't give fatwa in the matters of ethics, you give opinions. That's the difference. I want to conclude the lecture tonight by thanking you all.
Thank you very much.
That it was a wonderful few of you all came, every time, and we say, Ustad ka dil bhara hua hota hai. When you find people around you, you feel much better than having empty seats, in front of you. So it's for your dedication and your coming regularly, my sister, I'm very grateful and thankful because that was the inspiring moments for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu everyone. Thank you all for coming. You all will get an email in about 2 minutes. I scheduled it at 8:40 for an evaluation for the class. So if you can send that, that would be really helpful so we can know what else other kind of classes. Inshallah, we'll have a class every month. It's going to be 3 or 4 weeks long, covering different topics. We're trying to get Professor back here to teach Ruby and Hafiz. So
my wife will divorce me. She warned me, if you go on Thursday nights, I will not stay in this house. So, because I'm actually in the afternoon.
We'll go to your house.
In all honesty, I'm in curfew when I go home. From morning I go to my office until about 6:30. She says, no books, no computers, nothing. I'm here, sitting in front of you. You better talk to me. Until she goes to bed at 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10, then I can read, I can do anything I want. And I do observe that very obediently, because she has a right. I go away, I'm with my students, with my work, I don't even remember the house. Well, she is there whole day thinking, when will I come, what will I eat, what will I do, She is a traditional wife who doesn't help